government is in debt, massive debt. Someone is getting paid billions in interest every single month. And the person they owe the most money to? It's probably you. And you have no idea. Most people think the government owes money to China, some scary foreign power holding America hostage. But that's not the real story. The truth is so much stranger, so much closer to home. And when you find out who's really holding the bag, everything about how the economy works will make you furious. This is the story of who the government really owes and why you're the one paying for it. Let's start with a number you need to hear. The United States government owes $38 trillion right now. $38.4 trillion. Write that number out, and it has 13 digits. If you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you over 100,000 years to spend that much. That's 10 Germanys, 15 Japans. The entire global economy for half a year. And it's not slowing down. Every day, every single day, that number grows by $8 billion. While you sleep, while you work, while you scroll through your phone. $8 billion added to a debt that will never actually be paid back. But here's the question nobody asks. Who did they borrow all that money from? Who has trillions of dollars just lying around to lend? Where did it come from? And what happens when they want it back? The answer is going to shock you, because it's not what you think. And the implications are darker than you can imagine. Let me tell you what most people think. They think China owns America, that China holds all our debt and could destroy us by selling it. Politicians love this narrative. It's scary. It's simple. It makes for good sound bites. And yeah, China does hold U.S. debt. They've been a major buyer for decades. But here's the twist that changes everything. They're not even in the top 2 anymore. Not even close to being the biggest lender. They've been quietly selling, backing away. So who took their place? Japan. Japan holds about $1.1 trillion in U.S. debt. They're number 1, the biggest foreign creditor to the United States. And number 2, the United Kingdom, over $800 billion. Think about that for a second. Your closest allies, the countries you share intelligence with, the nations you fought wars alongside, they hold more American debt than your supposed enemies. China's been quietly selling off their holdings for years. They're down to about $760 billion now, still massive, but falling. And here's what that tells you. China's preparing for something. They're slowly decoupling from the American economy, reducing exposure, building independence. While everyone's been scared of China owning America, they've actually been getting out, diversifying away from dollars. That should tell you something. When your creditor starts quietly backing away, that's not confidence, that's concern. But foreign debt, that's only about a quarter of the story. About $8.5 trillion out of 38 total. So where's the rest? Who holds the other $30 trillion? This is where most people's understanding completely falls apart. Because they assume it's foreign. It has to be, right? Wrong. And this is where the story flips. Because the real creditor isn't foreign. Americans hold most of it. American institutions, American banks, American pension funds, your retirement account, your insurance company, your local government's employee pension. All of it stuffed with U.S. Treasury bonds. And here's the part that's going to make you mad. The single biggest holder of U.S. government debt isn't a country, isn't a bank. It's a system you've been paying into your entire working life. Let me explain how this scam actually works. The Federal Reserve, America's central bank, holds about $4 trillion of government debt. $4 trillion. That's roughly 10% of the total. Think about that for a second. The government borrowed from its own central bank. How does that even work? How can you borrow from yourself? Here's how. The Fed creates money out of nothing. Digital entries in a computer. Then it uses that created money to buy government bonds. The government gets the money and spends it immediately. On programs, on military, on whatever Congress approved. And the Fed gets a bond, an IOU, a promise to pay it back with interest. It's basically printing money with extra steps, a shell game to make it look legitimate. And you're feeling the effects of it every single time you go to the grocery store and prices are higher. Every time rent goes up. Every time your dollar buys less. That's what happens when the central bank creates trillions to buy government debt. It dilutes every dollar you're holding, makes your savings worth less, your paycheck weaker. But it keeps the government spending machine running. But here's where it gets personal. Here's where you need to pay very close attention. Social Security. The Social Security Trust Fund holds about $2.4 trillion in government debt. $2.4 trillion. And you need to understand what that actually means, because this is where the betrayal becomes clear. For decades, Social Security collected more money than it paid out. You paid in through payroll taxes. Your employer paid in. Every single paycheck. And for years, there were more workers paying in than retirees taking out. So there was extra money left over, a surplus, trillions of dollars sitting there. And by law, that surplus could only be invested in one thing. U.S. government treasury bonds, nothing else, just government debt. So Social Security loaned its extra money to the government, every penny of surplus. And the government took that money and spent it immediately on the Iraq War, on tax cuts, on bailouts, on programs and projects that had nothing to do with retirement. They raided the Social Security piggy bank and spent your future. And they gave Social Security a piece of paper in return, an IOU, a promise to pay it back later with interest. Well, later is now. Social Security started paying out more than it takes in a few years ago. The demographics shifted, more retirees, fewer workers. So it's cashing in those IOUs, asking the government for its money back. But here's the problem that nobody in power wants to talk about. The government doesn't have it. They already spent it. Years ago. It's gone. So how do they pay Social Security back? They borrow more money from someone else. They issue new bonds, take on new debt, use that to pay off the old debt to Social Security. It's a shell game, moving debt from one pocket to another, refinancing with extra steps. And every time they do it, the total debt grows. The interest payments grow. And you're the one funding all of it. Here's what nobody wants to tell you, the part that should make you sick. Social Security's trust fund will be completely empty by around 2033. Maybe 2035 if they're lucky. That's less than 10 years away. That $2.4 trillion in government bonds, it'll be gone. Completely depleted. And then what happens? Then they'll have to cut your benefits by about 20 to 25%, or raise your payroll taxes significantly, or borrow even more money to cover the gap. The retirement you were promised, that you paid into for 40 years, is backed by debt. And that debt has already been spent multiple times over. And it's not just Social Security. Federal employee pensions hold over $2 trillion in government debt. Military retirement funds, civilian pensions, all of it in treasury bonds. Medicare trust funds hold hundreds of billions more. All of it just IOUs from a government that's already spent the money. This is what they call intergovernmental debt. The government owing itself. About $7.3 trillion of it. It sounds insane because it is insane. But that's how they keep the illusion going. They borrow from future programs to fund current spending. And this is where it gets even darker. Let me show you what this debt actually costs. Not the total, not the principal, the interest, the cost of servicing all this borrowing. Because this is where the scam reveals itself. Last year, fiscal year 2025, the U.S. government paid over $1.2 trillion in interest on the debt. $1.2 trillion. Let me put that in perspective. That's more than the entire defense budget, more than they spend on Medicare, more than education, veterans, agriculture, and transportation combined. Just interest. Money thrown into a void, going to bondholders, not building anything, not helping anyone. Just the cost of having borrowed too much. And it's accelerating. In just the first 3 months of fiscal year 2026, October through December, they paid $276 billion in interest. That's $92 billion per month, $3 billion per day, just interest. And that's 13% higher than the same period last year. Every year it grows because the debt grows. And because interest rates, even though they've come down from their peaks, are still elevated compared to the decade of near zero rates we had. Think about what that means. They're paying more to borrow more to pay interest on what they already borrowed. It's a compounding spiral. And the only way it works is if they can keep borrowing. Keep finding people willing to lend. Keep the confidence game going. Here's what should terrify you. Interest payments are now the fastest growing part of the federal budget. Within the next few years, they'll be spending more on interest than on defense. More than on any single program. And there's no way to cut it. You can't vote to reduce interest payments. You can't slash that spending. It's locked in. Contractual. The debt exists. The interest is owed. And it will consume more and more of the budget until something breaks. Think about what that means for your life, for your taxes. Every dollar you send to Washington in taxes, a growing percentage of it goes straight to interest payments. Not schools, not infrastructure, not healthcare, not anything that benefits you or your community, just interest. Paying back lenders for money politicians spent years or decades ago. You're working to pay debt service on decisions made before you were born. And your kids will be doing the same for decisions being made right now. It's generational theft. Normalized. Systematized. Inevitable. But here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. What happens when the system breaks? Because it will break. It has to. The math doesn't work forever. And history is very clear about what happens when debt spirals out of control. Let me show you the nightmare scenario. Imagine the major holders, Japan, China, the UK, pension funds, decide they don't trust US debt anymore. Maybe inflation stays high. Maybe they see the political dysfunction and realize America can't get its fiscal house in order. Maybe they just get nervous, so they start selling. Not all at once, just slowly reducing their holdings, not buying new bonds when the old ones mature. What happens? The government still needs to borrow. It has to. It's spending more than it takes in. So it has to find new buyers. But if the big holders are backing away, the only way to attract new buyers is to offer higher interest rates. So rates go up. which makes the debt more expensive, which means they have to borrow even more to cover the higher interest costs, which makes investors even more nervous, which means rates have to go higher. It's a feedback loop, a death spiral. And when interest rates spike, everything else breaks. Your mortgage rate goes up, car loans, credit cards, business loans. The entire economy slows down. Companies can't afford to borrow to expand. People can't afford to buy houses. Consumption drops. Recession hits. And when recession hits, tax revenues fall, which means the government has to borrow even more, and the cycle accelerates. That's the trap. That's the end game if confidence breaks. And we're closer to that edge than most people realize. The debt to GDP ratio is approaching 120%. That means we owe more than the entire economy produces in a year, and it's projected to hit 150% within a couple decades. At some point, the math stops working. The confidence breaks. And when it does, it won't be gradual. It'll be sudden, violent. And most people won't understand what's happening until their savings are gone. And this is the part governments hope you never connect. The biggest threat isn't foreign creditors dumping bonds. It's domestic collapse. It's Americans losing faith in their own system. If you stop trusting that Social Security will be there when you retire, you change your behavior. You save differently, spend differently. If pension funds realize they're holding debt that won't be honored, they panic. If regular people understand that the dollars they're saving are being systematically destroyed by the very debt that's supposed to back them, trust evaporates. And once trust is gone, it never comes back. Not quickly, not easily. Money only works because we all agree it has value. When that agreement breaks, the system collapses. And no amount of printing, no amount of promises can rebuild trust once it's shattered. Look at where we are right now. 38 trillion in total debt, growing 8 billion per day. That's 2.25 trillion added just in the last year. 1 year. Think about that. In 12 months, they added more debt than the entire economy of Canada. The debt is now bigger than the entire U.S. economy, bigger than everything America produces, builds, and earns in a full year, and it's accelerating. Congressional Budget Office projections show the debt hitting 52 trillion by 2035. 52 trillion. That's less than 10 years from now. At that point, interest payments alone could be $2 trillion a year. 2 trillion, just interest, every single year, forever. That's more than Social Security, more than Medicare. Just the cost of having debt, and there's no plan to stop it. No political will to change course. Just vague promises that somehow, someday, they'll deal with it. And here's the truth nobody wants to admit. This debt will never be paid back. Not ever. It can't be. The only way the system keeps functioning is by constantly refinancing, borrowing new money to pay off old debt, rolling it over, forever. It works as long as people keep trusting, keep lending, keep believing that America is good for it. But it's a confidence game, and confidence, once shaken, collapses fast. Here's what's really happening. The people in charge, the politicians making these decisions, the central bankers buying the bonds, they're all playing a game of musical chairs. They're hoping the system holds together just a bit longer. Long enough to not be their problem. Long enough to retire, to move on, to let someone else deal with the consequences. They're making decisions today that will destroy lives in 10 or 20 years. And they know it. They just don't care because they won't be the ones suffering. You will. You're not just a taxpayer. You're a creditor. Through Social Security, you've loaned the government money. Mandatory loans, taken from your paycheck before you even see it. Through your pension fund, your 401k, your mutual funds, you own government debt. Your bank holds treasuries, your insurance company, your state and local government pensions. All of it backed by the promise that the U.S. government will pay its debts. And the debtor's running out of ways to keep that promise. They're not even trying to pay it back. They're just trying to keep it from exploding until it's someone else's problem. And when it finally does explode, when the trust breaks, when the debt becomes unpayable, you're the one holding the bag. So who does the government owe trillions to? They owe Japan 1.1 trillion. The UK over 800 billion. China 760 billion. Other foreign investors for about 6 trillion more. They owe the Federal Reserve 4 trillion. They owe Social Security 2.4 trillion. They owe federal pensions over 2 trillion. They owe Medicare trust funds, military pensions, state and local retirement systems, mutual funds, banks, insurance companies. And they owe themselves for 7 trillion through various intragovernmental debt. But most importantly, they owe you, whether you know it or not, whether you agreed to it or not. Your future earnings are pledged to service this debt. Your retirement is backed by IOUs that have already been spent. Your savings are denominated in a currency that's being diluted to manage debt that can't be repaid. And here's the part that should terrify you most. When $38 trillion of debt is owed to everyone and no one at the same time, when interest payments consume the entire budget, when promises can't be kept and trust finally breaks, it won't happen slowly. History shows it never does. It happens fast, sudden, overnight. Markets freeze, banks close, savings evaporate. And most people won't understand what happened until everything they worked for is gone. The politicians who created this mess, they'll be fine. Protected pensions, book deals, comfortable retirements. The central bankers, golden parachutes. The wealthy who understood the game, they moved their wealth into real assets years ago. Real estate, commodities, businesses, things that hold value when currencies fail. It's you, the person who trusted the system, who worked hard, who saved in dollars, who believed the promises. You're the one who gets destroyed when this debt bomb finally explodes. This isn't some distant future problem. This is happening now. Right now. Every day the debt grows. Every month the interest payments increase. Every year the gap between what's promised and what can be delivered gets wider. The fuse is lit. The only question is how long until it reaches the bomb. The government owes trillions. But the real debt isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in broken promises, stolen futures, a social contract that's been violated so thoroughly that when people finally understand it, the rage will be uncontrollable. They promised your Social Security would be there. It won't be. Not fully. They promised your tax dollars would build a better country. They didn't. They went to interest payments on debt from wars you didn't support and programs you never benefited from. Now you know who holds the debt. The real question is what happens when they stop holding and start demanding payment. When Social Security needs its money back and there's none left. When pension funds realize they're insolvent. When foreign creditors lose faith. When you finally understand that the retirement you planned for is backed by promises that ain't be kept. Nobody has an answer for that. Not the politicians. Not the economists. Not the Federal Reserve. They're just hoping, praying that it holds together a little bit longer, that the collapse happens on someone else's watch, but you'll still be here, still working, still paying taxes, still wondering how it all went so wrong. The government owes trillions, and you're the one who's going to pay, not in taxes, in broken promises, in a future that was stolen to fund a present you never agreed to. Now you know. The only question is what you're going to do about it.